lethality, audacity, creativity. That's the culture of the Special Forces Regiment and the values each special operator are expected to live by. They're also the foundation of what it takes to be the premier, partnered, irregular warfare force in the arsenal of the United States military.
The United States fights coalition warfare. We don't ever want to fight by ourselves.
Our nation's Green Berets, civil affairs, and psychological operations soldiers are led by Major General Gil Ferguson, the commanding general of 1st Special Forces Command, or known more doctrinally as the Operational Force. He commands the tactical units that fight and win America's most complex battle in every corner of the world. For the final interview of our Fort Liberty series, I sat down with General Ferguson from the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Museum for a conversation on what it takes to man, train, and equip our Special Forces units. We dug into his goal to enhance the culture of the regiment, how the Special Forces groups are preparing for regional conflicts with unknown enemies at unknown times, and just how Green Berets are solidifying themselves as the go-to option in the deep sensor fight against our peer adversaries. General Ferguson also explains the soft, space, cyber triad, where he sees Special Forces in a decade, and as our units evolve, what actually needs to stay the same. Take a listen and watch or read my conversation with America's top Green Beret, then head over to our YouTube channel to watch General Ferguson share the lineage of America's first Special Forces. The Jedburgh Media Channel's first documentary, Unknown Heroes, Behind Enemy Lines at D-Day, the story of Operation Jedburgh, is available now.
You are responsible for our Special Forces group, what we call the operational force.
Right.
We've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days about the training group.
Yes.
Right? And we brought in that piece of history before we were speaking here. We were talking about the Jedburghs, or as you call them, the Jedburghs.
The Jedburghs.
That's right.
Yes.
Because you started that with me a couple of weeks ago when we were texting about this.
Right.
You better get the name right.
Right. Yeah.
So now I got to put that in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
But that's the lineage, right?
Yes.
The lineage of creating an organization that there's a word, and I'm going to read it in a second, that's very critical to the Special Forces Regiment, both in our legacy, in our history, back to the OSS and the operational groups and the Jedburghs, all the way through today, and it's the word partnered.
Yes.
And the vision for 1st Special Forces Command is very simple. We're the premier partnered irregular warfare force.
Yes.
What is that?
Hardly any element in the military does not partner. I mean, you can go to the Navy, the surface fleet, and they're going to go do maneuvers with some other Navy somewhere, right? And they're going to get together and have, shore, whatever they call that, shore leave or whatever it is. And, they'll get together, they'll have functions, they'll build cohesion. I mean, that's how we fight. We fight coalition warfare. The United States fights coalition warfare. We don't ever want to fight by ourselves. So it's really that. We've got some walking around this museum here. Where there's going to be some Continental Army history in this facility, and I mean we all know we had the French on our side, right? And the relationship with the French to gain our independence was tremendously important. So that is in our DNA, and it's in a lot of other countries' DNA too. But so when you start there at sort of the strategic and operational level, we fight coalition, we fight joint. When you bring that down to our level, the big difference between what Special Forces does, U.S. Army Special Forces does, and all the other SOF units in SOCOM that partner as well, is for us, it's not just a way to get to the X. It's not just a means to an end. It's an end in itself. We are fundamentally a small formation. We're a 12-man detachment if we're at full strength, right? Which most of ours aren't. And so you're not going to go do a raid with 12 people. It's just not feasible unless it's something that's probably not worth you spending your time on. And so our mission is to not just operate in that 12-man element. It's to go to other places, to other countries, to tie in with the indigenous population there, the indigenous elements there, whether they're irregular or they're conventional forces, conventional SOF, even just conventional forces, to tie in with them and to benefit from their expertise, their understanding of the culture, their understanding of the nuances of living there, their understanding of the way people fight there. and to serve as a force multiplier. So we're going to bring capabilities that the United States brings to the fight that they're not necessarily going to have, and we're going to empower them and enable them, and we're going to empower them and enable them with the capabilities that the U.S. brings to bear. So that's how we talk about it. And when I say premier, that's important because I want people to understand when Joint Task Force commanders, when 3-star Corps commanders, when 4-star commanders see a problem and they're like, hey, I really need to know what's going on in the extended deep where all of this, where the integrated fires command is and where all the long-range shooters are. That's a Green Beret problem. I need some Green Berets to get in there with the partner force and figure out what's going on, whether it's a resistance or a partnered force, or what's even better, the partner of a partner.
We live in a very complex world.
Right.
The regiment is structured very appropriately with a regional focus.
Correct.
We have every group says, I got this region of the world. How do you actually man, train, equip, validate, and deploy a force that has to be centralized to somewhat, but has to be, as it says here, okay, culturally astute, regional oriented, and globally networked to fight very differently in different regions of the world. 7th Group in South America is not 5th Group in the Middle East or 1st Group in the Pacific.
Correct. My job is not to continually, constantly, maybe that's the better word, be specifying 5th Group, you need to be focused on this. 7th Group, you need to be focused on that. Because we have raised up, and we talked about some of these guys already, we've raised up generations of senior leaders that are in charge of those formations who have grown up in those formations or at least have spent time in those formations. Some of the leaders didn't grow up in those formations. I had no time in 10th Group other than going to pre-scuba in December at 10th Group, which is a bad life choice, but it built a lot of character. I had no time at 10th Group before I got out there, but everybody that worked for me grew up in 10th Group, almost exclusively. So those formations are designed to grow up with that, to over time learn, through OJT, frankly, the regional expertise, all of the nuances that you're talking about, understanding, hey, this is the difference. The Baltic states don't like being called the Baltic states, for example, right? I mean, they don't view themselves as this homogenous block. They view themselves very, very differently. And, when you get to 10th Group, you find out that that's how they feel. Whereas everybody in the U.S. government talks about the Baltics, as if, like the South. I mean, this, Georgia's not Texas. So,
and Boston. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, exactly, right. And the differences over there, there's probably way more differences between Estonians and Lithuanians than there are between Georgians and Texans, frankly. So those organizations grow up because they're immersed in the culture, they're immersed in the language. They grow up, and the NCOs and the officers in those formations, I'm not worried about them learning about their culture and their countries and their regions because their operational cycle, their deployment cycle, their training is all geared toward building that expertise over time. What we talk about at our level is primarily culture, okay? So, and if you haven't seen our one-page, so I gave a one-page culture statement when I came in. That's it. And, the Army's job has not changed. It is to fight and win the nation's wars. Our job within that construct is to do that as the premier partnered special operations irregular warfare formation. And what we talk about is who we are is as 1st Special Forces Command. Our culture is one of lethality, okay, audacity, and creativity. And I usually lay it out as I want creative people. Doesn't have to be complicated, okay? Doesn't have to be a new thing. Maybe it's an old thing used in a new way, but I need them to be creative, and they are, right? Because that's how we hire them. We recruit, assess, select, train people to be creative.
Sometimes too creative.
Sometimes, every now and again. So I want them to be creative. I want them to be audacious, all right? And by that, I mean understanding how to view, assess, mitigate risk, right? There's a difference between recklessness and audacity. Audacity is understanding what the risks are, understanding what the trades are, understanding what your formation's capabilities are, and saying, we're going to take this move. It's point de hoc. It's scaling the cliffs at point de hoc, right? To use that great Ranger analogy. It's jumping, it's putting Virginia Hall into France for months on end. It's jumping the Jeds in the night before. It's jumping the 82nd and the 101st in the night before the D-Day invasion. That's audacity. So I want them to be creative, and I want them to be audacious. And then I want them to be lethal. All right, and that gets to the fundamental underpinning, all three of those, that's the fundamental training underpinning for all of our formations, whether it's the SF groups, whether it's our civil affairs folks, whether it's our PsyOps folks, or it's our sustainment brigade. All of those folks, I want them to all think that way. Now, they're gonna focus on different levels, or they're going to focus differently on each one of those based on what they do, right? I don't need the fuelers in the 528th to be going out and doing fire and maneuver all the time, but I darn sure want them to know how to employ their weapon systems, to be confident and comfortable that if they get in a pickle somewhere, they can fight their way out of it, you know? And so that's what we do at our headquarters when you talk about certifying, validating, and deploying, and the organized training and equip responsibility. Look, it's a sacred duty. I love what I do because I know that I'm responsible, because if something goes sideways forward, they're going to come asking me and the two gentlemen that were here before, the CSM and the Command Chief Warrant Officer, hey, you guys said these guys were ready. What happened? I take that very, very seriously. And because I owe it to our formation, I owe it to their families, I owe it to the Army, I owe it to the nation to make sure that we're giving them the time, the tools, the resources to prepare so that they've got the foundation of fighting and winning our nation's wars wherever they go. And then the group is responsible for continuing to refine and tailor their capabilities for a specific AOR. I don't need 7th group learning how to drive snow machines, and I don't need 10th group focused on the jungle. But when the time comes and we end up going and fighting for 20 years in the desert, well, I'm going to need some folks, a cadre from that group that has got experience there. Like right now, it would be 3rd and 5th group still, right? And 7th group too. They spend a lot of time in Afghanistan, so that we can spread that knowledge very quickly. But that's where you get back to the culture of creativity and audacity. If we've got those folks in our formation, then they're going to be able to adjust and adapt to the theater's specific requirements if we do have to start weighting our effort toward one specific theater, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think the culture piece is really important because right now, I believe, and I've had conversations with a number of senior leaders across the command and in the Army writ large, that there's a perception, I'll call it a misperception, that SOF's capability is in two places. Number one, in the counterterrorism fight solely, and number two, potentially, either it really only left of conflict. What I mean, pre-conflict.
Right.
Now that's nuanced.
Competition.
Because those are actually almost opposing.
Right.
Those contradictions, those discussions are almost opposing, because you're saying, well, wait, so you're saying we can only be employed because for 20 years in the global war on terror, we were seen through the lens and the media lens, primarily through only a small number of the groups were engaged in this counterterrorism fight. With historically, as we talked about, that's not where we make our best work.
Correct.
So the regiment had everybody rotated through, but at the end of the day, the entire regiment wasn't committed to the counterterrorism fight. There was there was a lot of the regiment that was focused in their traditional, let's go out and partner with organizations and be prepared for the next fight. Much of the country never saw that.
Right.
And now what we have is an environment in which we're not in the news every day, for better or worse. We're not, there's a lack
It's usually
of,
for the better.
Yeah, usually for the better. But there's also a lack of an appetite to see U.S. soldiers deployed. And so you see a push now and we'll talk in a minute about conventional forces and what that means. But what are we doing now to overcome that misperception that SOF is a CT capability and we don't need them to be employed until that CT fight comes?
Okay. So I'll start really with addressing the potential. So I would disagree somewhat that there's a misperception about us only being involved in CT. I think rightfully so, we were concerned about that. There were certainly very clear messages coming from different aspects of the government, whether that's on the policy side or not, regarding CT focus. And so there was a lot of conversation about that, especially as the war in Syria was drawing to a close. Here's what I would tell you. It's good news. The Army, the Army is specifically looking to Special Forces to do things on the periphery and in the extended deep that they don't have the capability to do. And that's not a knock on the Army. That's the Army saying, I don't have sensors that can get into the extended deep to see where these things that will kill me are. I don't have the long-range fires to affect those things in the extended deep. So we are seeing, what I would tell you is I'm seeing an appetite. So this is and we'll come back to the CTCs in a minute, because it's a very critical component of this, right? But what I'm seeing when I'm having conversations with the guys that will be JTF commanders, so whether that's General Donahue, the 18th Airborne Corps commander, General Bernabe, the 3rd Corps commander, when we go out to NTC, to the CTCs, and we talk to these division and corps commanders, they know what the limits of their capability are. They know how far their stuff can go. And they know that our adversaries have highly proficient killing capability way beyond their ability to sense and affect. And so they are asking us to do those things. So that is really, really good news. So when we were talking, I think before the camera started rolling, about we're sort of back to our roots. We're really back to the pre-9/11 days where our offering, okay, the advantage we offer the joint force, the value that we offer them, is our ability, primarily through partners and potentially through resistance elements, okay, that are being contacted over the horizon and don't even necessarily have a face-to-face or a physical contact. That is what we're offering them, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for us to get really, really, really deep in the enemy's rear area to find their most potent weapon systems, okay? When we talk, that's our operating concept for 1st SF Command. We're going to operate in the extended deep primarily through partners. Again, back to that conversation about how the risk level, okay, in a denied environment, primarily through partners or resistance, and then we're going to operate on the periphery to impose cost, to create doubt, or and to cause confusion, on the periphery, and to change up the battlefield geometry. In the same way that when going back to where we started before D-Day, we weren't necessarily killing a whole lot of elements in the rear that then couldn't go fight, but we were forcing what the OSS and the SOE were doing was they were forcing the Germans to dedicate combat power to those areas that could have been dedicated to the front. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's critically important, because when we look at SOF, and that kind of brings up that second piece that I was talking about when we opened this squawk, is that you have that CT focus, but also where's SOF critical? SOF's critical prior to the event.
Yes.
You know that, but also during the event.
Right.
Because during the event is when we can open those second and third fronts. For example, you think about 10th Group's mission in the invasion in Iraq.
Right.
Okay, everybody was focused on Kuwait.
Right.
And the invasion of the conventional force, tanks, and everything coming up from the south. But what we did is we put 10th Group in the Kurdistan.
Right.
They arm and equip
Yeah.
Peshmerga of
Right.
50, 60,000 fighters.
Right.
And it forced, I think it was 17 divisions of Iraqi army could not move
Right.
south to
Yeah.
prevent that invasion.
Well, and an even more recent example, which is probably, arguably, and General Braga and I have talked about this before, the YPG, now known as the SDF, arguably the most effective partnered force that we've ever fought with at scale. If you ask yourself, how would the war against ISIS have gone had we not actually been able to establish an effective partnership with the YPG, the SDF in northern Syria? They were the maneuver element. They were the hammer, that began to drive ISIS back. And they were, a classic example of by, with, and through, and employing an indigenous force that seized terrain and frankly vanquished, an occupying terrorist army that at one point ruled everything across northern, central, eastern Syria all the way into, well into Iraq, so yeah, I think we have tremendous opportunity. I am not worried that the Army is trying to pigeonhole us at all. But I think that it's important for us to continue to be involved. When we go around and travel, I'm like, hey, where does the Army learn to fight? And the answer is the CTCs. That's where the Army learns to fight, right? And when you look at what Kurt Taylor is doing out at NTC, when you look at what Dave Gardner is doing out at JRTC, they are transforming those training centers more rapidly than they've ever been transformed in the past. And they are really pouring their heart and soul into turning those into world-class training venues that bring in all of these 21st century capabilities. And we have to be there. We've got 7th Group down there right now doing a SOF-only rotation. And it is the first time, certainly since I've been in the Army, that we've had a full siege of SOTF involved in JRTC. And that's where we can partner with the Army and we can all learn together, because we don't know where the next fight's going to be. We don't know who it's going to be with, and we don't know when it's going to start. So what we've got to do is focus on the things that we can control, and we can do that at the CTCs.
I think what you're bringing up is this thing we're hearing a lot in the media. We've heard a number of senior leaders talk about it too. This kind of what they're classifying as this 1939 moment.
Yeah, we're in the interwar years. That's where we are.
And you even got the FBI director sitting in front of Congress saying, hey, the red lights are blinking. And I think we've all almost come to the conclusion that, although every agency and every organization is doing everything they can, and they're redlined in a lot of places, it almost becomes a matter of when, not if the event happens. And when the event happens, will we be prepared to respond? I would argue yes. You would argue yes. I know that.
Yeah.
SOF is successful though when we prevent the peer-to-peer fight.
Yes.
When we prevent nation state on nation state, superpower versus superpower. We don't have to go back too long. We can go back to the Cold War and the Russians, and how and the efforts that have been made there, and 10th Group's counter Russia efforts for decades, and continue to this day. We've seen it with that war between superpowers has to be fought through proxies, and through surrogates, and we see this with Hezbollah, we see this with Hamas, which is taken away from us putting boots on the ground in Iran potentially.
Right.
Okay. How do you see SOF's involvement as we look to this peer-to-peer fight, and we have these regional responsibilities, these regional actors? Where's SOF's involvement in this at that regional level?
Every group recognizes that they have a role in competition right now. So no secret, there's Russian private military contractors, PMCs, running all over Africa. There's Chinese elements. Economically, China basically owns Africa, right? I remember driving on a highway in Malawi in 2013, and the Chinese had just built that highway. You're driving up and down that highway, and every storefront has Chinese lettering on it.
The airports too.
Exactly.
Dumped all the airports.
Right. So
And they dumped all the people.
Yeah, right. So third group is primarily focused on a counter-violent extremist mission in Africa, whether that's in the Horn of Africa or whether that's in Northwest Africa. You're familiar with that because you got involved in that, while you were still on active service. But they also see what's going on everywhere else, and they have a mandate to try to compete. Now, there's a whole bunch of policy issues there, or concerns. I mean, there's policy decisions there to be made that are going to drive authorities, et cetera. So we're not, what all of the groups are doing, and I'm picking on third group just because of Africa, but what all of the groups are doing, irrespective of their region, is they're creative, right? And they're audacious, and so they're looking for opportunities to try to compete within the existing authorities, within the policy that the national decision makers have proliferated, and that flows down through the GCCs. So they are constantly looking for those opportunities to compete, and primarily they're doing that through, you mentioned the word generational partnerships earlier. That's what they're trying to maintain, right? So, we went into Kurdistan in the early 90s, right before Desert Storm. 10th Group maintained those relationships over time. Then they got, we dumped some nitrous oxide in there in 2003 when 10th Group and some other organizations went in. And then even after we left in 2011, when the war with ISIS kicked off again, those generational partnerships were still there. And folks went into Kurdistan, started everything right back up, and it was off to the races. And then the relationship with the YPG started through a generational relationship with other Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan that were affiliated with those guys. So it's that long burn. Colombia is another great example. The relationships, the guys that are running the Colombian military were all folks that, were captains with me when I was a 7th Group commander, and so that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in what we would call the competition space, left of crisis. We're building those capabilities, those generational partnerships, so that wars can be fought successfully through proxies. 10th Group and the Ukrainians is a great example, right? I mean, the war kicked off in, I'm going to get my dates wrong, I was in Iraq for that year. It was 2022, like February 2022, right? But 10th Group had been in Ukraine since 2014, working with Ukrainian SOF and transforming Ukrainian SOF. And so anyway, all of that stuff is being done sort of below the waterline before conflict. And to your point, when we're going into these high stakes conflicts with peer adversaries like the Russians, if you're not fighting through proxies, then we're at the risk of a thermonuclear conflict, and none of us really know where those red lines are. So there's it's some high risk poker, and I think SOF needs to continue to be able to provide those options to decision makers.
General Tobo was here when you came in. And
right.
I spent a lot of time together as his role now as the chairman of the Green Beret Foundation now, and our partnership with Green Beret Foundation, the podcast and everything, becoming a program of the Green Beret Foundation. We talk a lot about this concept that the Navy and the Air Force man the arms, meaning that
they're platform centric.
Yeah. They train people to operate systems. The Army arms the man.
Yes.
And there's a reliance on technology, whether you're in the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. But at the end of the day, the man, the person, people take and hold ground.
Yeah.
You see that
right.
all over the world. I mean, you only have to watch the news and see what's going on in like Gaza right now. Yes, we put a lot of effects on the battlefield very quickly. Right. But they still have to commit forces to close with and destroy the enemy in a very difficult terrain.
Yeah.
as we talk about change and evolution and this reliance on technology, how is SOF still putting the person, the operator, the Green Beret at the center of everything that they do, so that we use technology, we leverage it, but it's not the primary means by which we fight?
Yeah, one of the things that I talk to folks about all the time is technology is not going to win the next fight. The side that most effectively and audaciously employs technology is going to win. We're at a disadvantage technologically right now with some of our adversaries. I think that some of the Russian capability that we expected to be better than it, I think we expected some Russian capability to be better than it is. But they've still got some pretty capable tech. Whether the Chinese stuff is as good as we think it is remains to be seen. We don't want to find out the hard way. But our focus is you as the individual, you are what matters, okay? The technology isn't going to solve the problem. When you think about, I just saw a Wall Street Journal article, I think in Japan, the government is starting to issue some warnings about, hey, we need to slow the roll on artificial intelligence, right? And specifically, they're talking about social media and that type thing. But we're a long way from an autonomous vehicle that can weave its way through a forest and determine what the appropriate route is, right? We're just a long way from there. And I was talking to some folks yesterday. We were out at a range just about, if I get on a four-wheeler right now and start making my way through the woods, there's going to be some points where I'm going to be looking like this over the handlebars. Okay, should I go that way or that? We don't have anything like that in the AI sense right now. What is important is the establishment of those relationships, building the foundational capabilities with our partners that we would come to call on were we to have to fight a proxy fight through them, and then embracing all of the technology that we can. I do think, and this isn't maybe I'll answer your question this way. We are thinking very deeply right now about whether we need to not take away from all the MOSs that exist, and I'm being very ODA specific here. All the MOSs that exist on an ODA right now today are hugely important, but we're also asking ourselves, okay, with the level of complexity of the technology that we're employing, are we asking too much of our folks to say, okay, I need you, you're an 18 Bravo. I'm going to send you to this robotics training, which we're doing, okay, and they're doing great. But do we need to give that guy one more thing to do, or do we need to have a robotics MOS? So an 18 series guy on a detachment as an addition, not an in lieu of, but as an addition, whose sole job is to work with unmanned systems, whether they're in the air, whether they're on the ground, whether they're subterranean, whether they're underwater. He's the guy. He's like, no, I'm the robotics guy. I know how to fix these things. I know how to, hotwire these things. I know how to employ various different types of systems. I know how to work the loitering munitions, et cetera, et cetera. And we're thinking the same thing about fires. I mean, when did you come into SF?
In 2008.
Yeah, 2008. So I think the SOTAC program, the Special Forces JTAC program started. I think we stood that up while I was still a detachment commander, so early 2000s, like 2000, 2001. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is an entire MOS in the Air Force, and we're going to make this an additional duty for guys on an ODA.
My medic was the
100%. I lived it as a group commander. All the group commanders, just maintaining the certifications alone is a tremendous task. And frankly, we're always behind. So now add on to that shooting long-range air-launched precision effects from 500-600 kilometers away from a B-2 that, oh, by the way, in flight has got to track, some sort of surface vessel. Okay, track quality, ever heard of that? Right, that's a big deal in the Indo-Pacific theater. If you don't have a certain track quality, then whatever the munition you've launched, whatever that is, it's not going to actually get to where it's supposed to get and hit the thing it's supposed to hit, right? Not to mention, how many of those do you need to create an effect on that kind of target, et cetera, et cetera. the complexity of the task of controlling fires and being an expert in fires, it's too much, I think, at this point to be an additional duty. So we're looking at those two specific things. So back to your original question, how do you keep the man or woman at this point, the individual soldier, the Special Forces soldier, the center? It's by adjusting and thinking the way we are, which is, okay, I need you to be really good at your job. I've given you too many tasks. Okay, there's a reason that some airplanes have more than 2 people in the cockpit, right? I mean, it's a lot for one guy to do. And so I would say that's a very specific example of how we're thinking in a little bit of a transformative way, in a creative way, back to the Who We Are document, about what we can do in the future to keep the individual in the center of what we're doing.
Yeah, that would be a big shift when you talk about transitioning of the MTO.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. That will have to be part of it. I think that when we go around and talk to team sergeants, the one thing every single one of them asks for is more time. Without getting into specifics here, we are decisively engaged in transforming our operational cycle, because the things that we're asking our people to do are too complicated and too complex, and they require time. I mean, you know the deal. I mean, you can build the house a little bit faster, but there's only so fast you can go to build it right. And that's where we are. And so we're relooking all of that, and we want to get that codified all the way up through SOCOM and get that set into concrete so that our team sergeants have the time to do all of that.
One of the big topics that kind of comes along with this transformation is this integration of cyberspace and SOF.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk for a second about how the regiment's looking at that integration, and why is SOF concerned with cyber and space? Yeah,
very, very quickly, the way I try to articulate it when we talk to the formation, and the soft space cyber triad is General Braga's term. That's the one that we use all the time, and you've probably heard it. And he realized he picked that because of the nuclear triad, right? That the three apexes of the triangle there, or corners of the triangle there. If I'm messing my geometry up, it's been a while. They're all dependent on each other, right? And he started to see, when he was out in the Indo-Pacific, he really started to realize we have SOF everywhere. At any given time, we've got roughly 2,500 people deployed to 70 to 80 different countries, right? So there's adversary capability all over the globe that we have people doing JSETs within very close proximity to. And so the thing that the space and the cyber folks, they've got all of these great capabilities, they've got all of these great skills. What they don't have is placement and access. They don't have presence. They don't have partnerships. We have people that drive by some of these things every single day. And maybe they're partners, or maybe they're partners of partners. So that gives us placement. That gives us access. That gives us presence. So really all we're trying to get our folks to understand is how they, through their placement, access, presence, and partnerships, how they can provide a capability to the space, anyone with space capabilities, anyone with cyber capabilities, to employ what they have, either over the horizon or at the physical site. And so we're not trying to turn our folks into space and cyber experts. We may actually, that's kind of what we're looking at next. Do we need an 18 series cyber MOS? Do we need an 18 series space MOS? We're looking at a lot of these capabilities going into the future, because the information or the information environment is becoming so critical, especially when you get into technology, to everything we're doing. We're looking at those farther down the road as far as potential additional MOSs too. But that's how we're linking it together. The thing I try to tell everybody is, hey, 50 years ago, you looked at the enemy through a pair of binos. Now you're looking at the enemy with a bunch of different sensors on some sort of platform, whether it's ground-based or air-launched or space-based. It's still surveillance. It's still reconnaissance. You're just using a different tool. And likewise, we went to a lock picking course, to figure out how to get into the front door. And those are still valuable, right? Now, you don't even have to pick the lock. You can unlock the lock through cyber means, over the horizon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
As you look forward, and you kind of craft your vision, and you see where you want the regiment to be, 5, 10, 15 years. What's the biggest challenge you see to the evolution of the regiment?
I hit it on it already. Not having enough time. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. The three of us, we take very, very seriously the responsibility to do organized train and equip. It's not a boring job. It is a sacred duty, and when you see the way the Army takes that responsibility, that I feel the same way. I mean, at this point, we've lost a lot of teammates. My wife and I have held a lot of hands at funerals, and in events beyond that, and we have long-lasting relationships with families that are dealing with a loss from which they'll never recover, whether that's parents or spouses, children. So we take that very, very seriously, and that is why, I am laser focused for this next 15 months that I have in command to, like I say, I'll say it again, to set in concrete an operational cycle that allows our team sergeants to get the training time they need. So here just a little bit of backstory on that. We're a much younger formation than we were when you came in 2008. The 18 X-ray program is a fantastic program, and 18 X-rays make up more than 50% of our force now. And that is a good thing. They are keeping us healthy. They are keeping us moving forward. They are super fit. They're super smart. They're super motivated. The ones that make it through that pipeline, the attrition rate, you may have talked about that with SWCC, but the attrition rate from somebody who raises their hand and says, I want to be an X-ray, and then shows up to Army basic training and quits day 2, or whatever. I mean, the attrition rate is really, really high. So the ones that we get they are tremendously, tremendously capable individuals, but they're inexperienced. And having come from the war before, or the Army before the war, experience was no guarantor of being a good Green Beret necessarily, right? So that's not the argument. My point is, I owe them time. I owe them time to get reps, to be a really, really, really solid junior Bravo or junior Charlie before they start having to figure out, okay, and this is what it means to be a junior Charlie in my theater, to be a junior Charlie, employing my language and understanding this culture in my theater. And oh, by the way, now layering on the different technologies and risks and challenges within my theater. They can't do that if they don't have time. That's my biggest concern, full stop.
What's the biggest opportunity?
It's the same one. Every challenge, every risk is an opportunity, every single one. And so I think we have an opportunity in the next 15 months to codify an operational schedule that is going to be transformational for our formation. We have never done this. We have never forced ourselves to stick to a 24-month operational cycle where you have a full 18-month workup to go to. You got 6 months of individual to go to all your PME, to go get your Halo Jump Master, to get your tandem certification, to go down and be a dive soup, to go to the DMT course, yada, yada, yada. And then to go to, all the different, just Army PME, and then another 12 months of collective training where you are going to the range, where you're learning the new tech that, here, congratulations, we've just given you a new radio and a new computer and a new this and a new that, to learn all of that stuff, and then frankly, to hold ourselves to a standard, which is going to be a cultural shift where team sergeants have to say, hey, Ferguson, I got it. You're ready to go on this deployment, but you just showed up and we're deploying in whatever that time window is. We draw a line, and if you show up after that date, okay, maybe you go to the B team or you go work at the SOTF, but you can't go to the ODA because we're not going to say that you're certified to go forward because you haven't gone through the workup with the team. We don't have it all figured out yet. There will be challenges with all of that, but I think that's a tremendous opportunity to, within and I'll bear with me. I'm going to give you a war story on that one. I think the first guys coming out of that cycle are going to say, wow. And I'll tell you, they will, because I lived through it. So in my other life out, down on the other side of post, when I was a squadron commander, we went to because we'd grown the organization to 4 squadrons, and we went to a longer cycle so that we had a full 12 months in between. And when we got through that 12 months, I had highly experienced folks that had been out in that formation for years they were like, wow, I have never felt more ready to go back on a deployment. Not like I'm sick of this, but more ready as in we've done this, and it allowed folks to train the way they had before the war started, and we were just churning and churning and churning. And we will see that same experience with ODAs when they start coming out of the backside of this new operational cycle.
And performance will be higher.
100%, yeah.
We spoke yesterday with General Beaupere and Sergeant Major Strong about the establishment of the Psychological Operations Center and how they're going to build a school.
Yeah.
And if you think about back to the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center.
Right,
School,
it was the PsyWar school, right?
Yeah, exactly. Those units, those formations are also under your command.
Yes.
We spent a lot of time breaking down the Green Beret aspect.
Right.
But these are critical components
Yes.
of the SOF fight. Can you talk for a second about how the psychological operations and the civil affairs formations are fitting into the overall vision, and how they're supplementing the core mission of the Green Beret element?
Yeah. And frankly, I'll start with your last comment there, because we've got current missions where, frankly, the civil affairs and the PsyOps folks are straight up in the lead. I'll tell you, when I was the 10th Group Commander, one of the most effective sort of sensitive activities oriented, it wasn't really sensitive, but it was an irregular warfare oriented missions that we had going in Ukraine, was a PsyOp mission. It was hands down the most effective. And so there are places where they're actually the main effort, and I'm not just talking about MISTs. There are places in Africa where the civil affairs mission is way more valuable than, frankly, having 18 series folks there, just because of the conditions on the ground. So those two, they're both small formations, and there's a CA and a civil affairs and a PsyOp capability within the reserve component. It's U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Command. But we really own the bulk of all of the active duty civil affairs and psychological operations capabilities. And so everywhere we go, there's some missions it's more heavily SF weighted, some it's more heavily CA weighted, et cetera. But what we typically try to do is go as a composite formation of sorts. And we've made some, I don't know if y'all talked yesterday, but we've made some transformational changes just with respect to the way the CA and PsyOp formations are organized. We've done a full reorganization there to get ourselves better aligned.
What's it look like?
So what we did was, in up until and this summer is when it'll officially go into effect. It's de facto in effect now. This summer it will become, I guess, de jure in effect when we actually change the rating schemes. But we created a CA and a PsyOp, two PsyOp brigades or groups, and then one civil affairs brigade that really have existed outside the groups. And I've struggled with that since I was a young captain. It didn't make any sense to me because, when you go into an SF group, when you go into an infantry battalion or an infantry division, they don't have a separate intel battalion that then, that everyone doesn't work back through a separate chain of command, right? because then they're forward with an infantry battalion and they're working for somebody back at Fort wherever, answering their requirements. It doesn't make any sense. You know, if you look at the way that we've used the DIVARTY over the past 20 years, and the Army is changing it because the BCT is no longer a unit of action, the division is. But when the BCT was the unit of action, which frankly the group is the unit of action, right? The group level. The brigade size formation is the unit of action. The artillery battalions actually worked, they worked for that brigade commander. That BCT commander was that artillery battalion's raider. So that's what we've done. We've made the CA and PsyOp battalions raiders, the group commanders. And so, because we all know, the way you get unity of command or unity of effort is through unity of command. That's the number one way to achieve it.
Are they co-located too?
No, we haven't been able to co-locate everybody just because that's congressional involvement. That's restationing and everything. I wish we had started it, over a decade ago, because we probably would have it done by now. But we're already seeing. I just had a PsyOp battalion commander. She came up to my office the other day to talk to me about some of the things that she's seeing that have benefited. So anyway, all that just to say, everywhere we go, I already talked about the information environment, right? We need people working with those partners who can, the partners, they understand the language and the culture. We don't need to try to create products for them because we're going to miss the joke, right? I mean, that's how you know you're really good at speaking a language, when somebody tells a joke and you actually get it. You know what I mean? They get their own jokes. We don't need to go try and reinvent. And we did do that a lot, in the Middle East for years. We came up with our own products. The best way to do CA and PsyOp is through your partner, right? And without getting into specific areas, both of those formations have access to partners that understand the culture. On the PsyOp side, understand the culture, understand how to message, understand who to message. But just like an ODA brings joint capabilities that the partner force isn't necessarily going to have, our PsyOpers bring capabilities that they own, tech that they own, an understanding of how social media is networked together that maybe the partners don't understand. And they can teach them, they can train them, they can give them a little bit of kit, they can work together. Oh yeah, hey, I think we should really message this. Okay, they start working together, the partner comes up with the message, the means, etc., the audience, and then we just help them generate it. And the same thing on the CA side. Civil Affairs has access to networks that 18 series folks don't, because they have different authorities. And so they can lay out, one of the things that we'd forgotten for 20 years was, if we go loud with a tier 1 adversary like China or Russia, that is going to be a whole of society effort. The role 2 and role 3 hospitals they're not going to get it done. They're going to be insufficient for the number of wounded that we're going to have. So having relationships with emergency services in partner countries that can help us in consolidation areas, wide area security, those kinds of things. What I'm really trying to get the CA folks to focus on is governance and stability, right? So left of conflict, it's building relationships with all of these different networks, whether they're benevolent organizations, philanthropic groups, non-governmental organizations of any type, or emergency services, fire departments, police departments, sheriff departments, to help in the rear area with the handling of displaced persons, etc., handling of security, handling of casualties. And then, so that's sort of left of conflict. And then if you think about, if we could drop some of our soft civil affairs folks into areas that the Ukrainians have run the Russians out of, they'd have 5 years of meaningful work helping rebuild societies over there. So that's what we have them focused on. And really trying to, this RSOF integration where we've reorganized everything, we have just been too separate for too long, and we've never had the integration. And there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what everybody's capabilities are. And that's really the main focus of why we did this.
Yeah, I barely remember interacting with.
Yes. Or when you did, you were like, what are you guys doing here? Because they were working for some other major who was probably back at Fort Bragg. You know, and I've seen that through my whole career. So.
Yeah, I mean, and they're powerful capabilities.
They're tremendously capable, because the other thing they do is they identify people that, like, there's way more to that guy than we thought there is. He's connected to this person, this person. Now what do? Now they go back. Now we're back to the 4th Battalions. Yeah. Now they go find the Jeds, or they go find the ASOT Level 3 on a detachment. They go find the people that understand sensitive activities, and they say, you need to meet this guy. And they connect, and now you've got a whole other network that you're starting to build out that has additional capabilities that the 18s never would have, the Special Forces team never would have identified, because they're not interacting with those people.
We talked a lot about transformation and change. Mm-hmm. Where are we going? Mm-hmm. What's the future look like? Yeah. Also talked a lot about the history, right? Where we come from. As you look back on your career, and that you create your vision for the future, what has to stay the same?
The culture. So I would tell you this. When we talk about culture, I say, hey, if we get our assessment and selection right, and if we get our culture right, everything else will follow. And I believe that fully. I've seen that. That's what I've seen through my whole career. And there's a lot that goes into culture. History is a huge part of culture. Understanding, again, where you came from helps you figure out why you're where you are, who you are, that type thing. Why do we value the things that we do? You know, why does the Army have the little leadership, you know, the key attributes, leadership, you know, acronym on the NCOER? You know, why does the Army value those things? The only way to understand that is to go back and look at what the Army's been asked to do. You know, if personal courage isn't an attribute of a soldier, then we're going to lose the next fight. You know, if selfless service isn't an attribute of an American soldier, we're going to lose the next fight, you know? And so we've got to have an understanding of who we are and why our values exist, you know, and why do we value our values, right? Why are they important? We have to understand that. And then we have to continue to recruit and assess and select and train and retain people who are creative and understand the importance of, you know, audacity and lethality. It can't just be about being creative and we're spending all our time on tech. Well, okay, are you going to be able to put that in the hands of a partner, or use that in support of a partner to actually go fight and win the nation's wars, which frankly involves killing our enemies? Can you do that? You know, PsyOpers, you know, when you're creating wazoo AI messages, which I've got one of them hanging on my wall in my office, you know, because this kid did it. I say kid, he's not a kid, he's an E8, but they're all kids to me because I'm so old. But we're at an exercise in Indo-PACOM, and he came up with this thing. And then he walked me through the whole story of why he made it and how it fit in the culture where we were and how it would resonate with the society. I was like, that is why we hired you. If we keep hiring those people and keep giving them opportunities like that to feel valued for their contribution, and some of that is, you know, it's getting them off of Fort Liberty and getting them out to some exciting place to train. That's why they joined up. You know, as long as we keep doing that, I think we'll be in a good spot. But we've got to maintain our standards. We've got to maintain, and that means MOS proficiency and just frankly soldier proficiency. You know, both of those require a lot of time. That's where my head is going into the future as far as what we've got to maintain. I'm not worried about it. We've got all the talent we need. I mean, SWCC has given us great products. When I go out and talk to these I'm like, where'd you know, I talk to these kids, they look like we created them in some sort of laboratory. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're in the gym with them. I'm like, good grief, man. You know, I mean, oh, you got another 600 on the ACFT. You know what I'm saying? I mean, making a 300 on the APFT when I was a captain and a lieutenant, that's no big deal, man. I mean, you run fast, you do some push-ups and stuff. The ACFT is no joke, man. If you're maxing that thing, you're the real deal, you know. And so we've got all the raw material we need. We've just got to we've got to continue to maintain our standards for bringing folks in, and then I've got to give them time to train.
You mentioned proficiency, basic soldier skills.
Yes.
Last question. Test question.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a real question.
Yeah.
I think about habits. You know, think about baseline foundational.
Right. Yeah.
I talk to a lot of groups, you know, and they bring in and they're like, oh, you know, you were an SF guy, you know, Green Beret, you know, tell us how to be special.
Yeah.
The very first thing I tell them is there's nothing special about being special forces.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the difference between the special forces operating and everybody else is they need basics and the fun.
Yeah.
And everybody else, right, defined standard without compromise.
Yes.
I think about the Jedburghs. Think about the Jedburghs.
There you go. There you go.
And our predecessors. They had, and even today, are today's warfighters. You have a core foundational task, 3 of them: shoot, move, communicate. If you can shoot, move, communicate to a high degree of proficiency, and that's your habits, then we know from preparation that if we don't have to think about our habits, then we can apply our mental and cognitive focus to more complex challenges.
Right.
We're not thinking about the
Right.
routine things.
Muscle memory.
So what are the 3 things that you do every day, your shoot, move, communicate,
Oh, wow.
to be successful in your world?
Okay.
So
So
actually, that's
yeah. So I mean, I can the first 2 come right off are easy. I'm not one of those. I focus on getting enough sleep. Okay. I mean, that is at this level, you know, so that's the first one. I'd say sleep, and then fitness. That involves nutrition and getting into, you know, the Human Performance Training Center to do whatever it is I'm doing. I've got the Bridge Athletic app that our Thor guys, you know, use for all of our folks. We've all got access to it. They custom build you a training program based on your strengths and weaknesses, you know, in the areas you want to improve. It's all tailorable and scalable to how much anaerobic, how much aerobic do you need, et cetera. It's all functional fitness oriented. But yeah, I really try to get enough sleep because I've worked for plenty of folks who didn't, and you see what happens. You know, I know how disagreeable I get, how I don't make good decisions. I have a negative outlook, and all of that translates down. That all rolls downhill, you know. The best example was, you know, when I spent a year, almost 13 months as the J3 at CJTFOIR 2122, and we were just getting into the leading edge of all the Iranian one-way attacks on our installations everywhere, all over Iraq, Syria. And I was getting waked up, you know, 3-4 nights a week, and I'd be awake for, you know, 2 or 3 hours, you know, right in the middle of that cycle, that like midnight to 2 a.m., right? It's the witching hour. So of course that's when the moves are going to get busy. And it crushed me. And when I came back after that, I mean, I had a great aide and I had a great administrative NCO that I told them up front, I'm like, okay, I need you guys to be the not the filter, but you guys need to be the sensor, so that when I walk in, and they got very good at, when I would walk in, they could tell, okay, sir, go in your office and close the door, you know, and take 30 minutes and get yourself sorted out. You know what I mean? Because I'm not an introvert. I don't like my door closed. I like people to feel like they can pop in and that kind of thing. And that was really difficult for me. But they're like, no, get in there, close the door, you know. And so sleep and fitness. And then the other thing I think is that I would say is I am energized by interacting with our people. You know, when I go out and see our folks whether they're struggling with a problem or they're crushing a problem. So I'll give you a great example. General Braga is doing his capability exercise this week, and Saturday and Sunday was the congressional staffers. And so the CSM and I flew up. The mechanism, the way they were doing this, the construct, I guess, on Saturday was they were going to fly 2 of the C-27s that USASOC owns, fly up to D.C., pick up the staffers and the 2 C-27s and bring them back down, right? So they start off with like, hey, welcome to USASOC. You're on USASOC airplanes. We use these airplanes to train our military freefall force and to sustain all our airborne operations here at Fort Liberty, et cetera. We went up with a team from 3rd Group, and we were split onto both planes, and when we came back, we flew over St. Mare, and we jumped out, right? With them in the plane. We didn't tandem anybody, but they're all in the plane, so they get to see us, jocking up on the plane and, see ya, and we jump out. Very cool, very fun. But the best part of it was being with the team. And, it was great being with the team before the jump and on the plane and chit-chatting with them while we're flying back and, before we jump. But then the most rewarding part of the whole thing was being under canopy with these guys and watching just how good they were. They were highly, highly proficient. They've clearly spent a good bit of time doing it. That's super energizing for me. So, those are the things. I'm trying to take care of myself. My wife is the one that keeps me, she's the driving force behind all of that, making sure that I'm in a good spot, health-wise. But then and my staff understands that I don't want to spend time in my office. That is not where I'm effective. There's times that I get on the phone maybe with group commanders or battalion commanders, that type thing, and that's effective. But I need to be out touching the formation and interacting with them, because that's how I get the direct feedback. That's team sergeants, they are not shy about saying, sir, what are you doing? Why are we doing this?
We all really shy.
Exactly. Everybody wants candor right up until somebody's
Candid with them, right? And then, if you take umbrage and you go, oh, what's wrong with you? Then they'll never be candid with you again. Now you can go poll the force on whether they think I actually, value candor or not. I hope I do. I think I do. They'll be a better judge of it than me, because ultimately they're the judge of that.
They agree with you.
Yeah.
I've done my homework.
Yeah. You got your network out there, I know. So that's good. That's good.
So this has been a really insightful discussion on where we are as a regiment.
Yeah.
We talked about this 1939 moment.
Yes.
In a war period. And, I do believe personally that that's very true.
Yeah.
But that's where we as a regiment do our best work. And it's incumbent upon all of us as a nation, I believe, to truly understand and embrace that and put the full weight of our support behind what you're doing and the rest of USASOC is doing. Because when the time comes, and the time is now, in so many regions, the time is here.
Right.
This is it. We need this capability to be out there. We need to be out there in force and in mass and be well supported and well resourced to get the job done. And so I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a busy week for the whole community.
No, it's great. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for having me, and let me know if and when you want to do it again.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast, an official program of the Green Beret Foundation. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other long and short form content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow the Jedburgh Podcast and the Green Beret Foundation on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, or Threads. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Media Channel and the Green Beret Foundation remain committed to supporting all generations of U.S. Army Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.